Every spring it starts the same way. You hear the machines coming to life across the neighborhood, and you tell yourself it is time to get the garden ready again. You drag the tiller out of storage, wrestle it into position, pull the cord until it finally roars awake, and then spend hours pushing that heavy machine back and forth through the soil. It is loud, it is exhausting. Your hands vibrate, your back tightens, and by the end of the day you are covered in dust and sweat, staring at a patch of freshly turned earth that feels like an accomplishment. For a short moment, it looks perfect, dark, loose, and ready to grow food. But then 3 weeks pass, and something frustrating begins to happen. The weeds return, not slowly, but all at once, spreading faster than anything you planted. What looked clean suddenly looks out of control. And as the sun gets stronger, that soft soil you worked so hard to create starts to collapse into a dry, hard surface that cracks and sheds water instead of absorbing it. So you go back out there again, chopping, turning, fixing, trying to regain control. The work never really ends. Each season feels like starting from zero, repeating the same effort with the same results, stuck in a cycle where the garden demands more labor but gives less stability, and deep down it begins to feel like no matter how hard you try, the soil is fighting you instead of helping you. What most people never stop to calculate is what this yearly reset is really costing them. After all that work, when the soil still struggles to produce, you find yourself going back to the store for help. You buy bags of compost because the ground has no life left in it. You buy fertilizer because plants look weak. You burn fuel running the tiller again and again. You use more water because the soil cannot hold moisture on its own. One purchase does not seem like much, but they add up quickly. $50 here, $80 there, another $100 for amendments and supplies, and before you realize it, you have spent somewhere between $100 and $300 every single season just trying to make the garden function, and the next year you do it all over again because nothing you added actually stayed in place long enough to build lasting fertility. The system forces you to keep buying, keep fixing, keep replacing what should have been improving naturally. You are not creating soil that gets better with time. You are renting fertility one season at a time, paying repeatedly for something that disappears as soon as you disturb it again, and that quiet pattern of spending and restarting is what keeps so many gardeners working harder while becoming more dependent instead of more self-sufficient. The truth is, this is not happening because you are bad at gardening, and it is not because your soil is hopeless. The real problem is the method you were taught to follow. Most traditional advice tells you to break the ground, mix everything in, and start fresh each year. But that approach works against the way soil is actually created in nature. If you walk to the edge of a forest and look down at the ground, you will not find machines turning the earth. You will see leaves resting on the surface, slowly forming layers. Year after year, those layers feed the organisms below. Worms pull material downward, microbes build structure, roots open channels. The soil becomes soft, rich, and alive without ever being flipped over. Nature tills from the top down, not from the bottom up. When we come in with steel blades and churn everything, we interrupt that entire system. We tear apart the fungal networks that hold moisture. We expose protected organic matter to the air where it burns away. And we bring buried weed seeds to the surface where they immediately grow. What looks like preparation is actually destruction of the very biology that makes soil productive. Once you understand this, the frustration begins to lift because you realize the struggle was never your failure. You were simply using a system that resets progress instead of building it. The alternative is not another tool, another product, or another seasonal trick. It is a different way of thinking about the garden itself. Instead of treating it like a space that must be rebuilt every year, you begin to treat it like a permanent structure, something that stays in place and improves with time. Permanent beds are not about wooden frames or expensive materials. They are about deciding where growth happens and protecting that space so it is never disturbed again. You create clear paths where you walk, push wheelbarrows, and do your work, and separate growing zones where your feet never go. That simple separation changes everything. When you stop stepping on the soil, you stop compressing it. When you stop compressing it, the tiny air pockets and tunnels created by roots and organisms remain intact. Water can move through, oxygen can move through, life continues building instead of being crushed flat. Here's where most people are surprised. The goal is not to loosen the soil every spring. The goal is to create conditions where it never becomes hard in the first place. Instead of resetting the ground each season, you allow it to mature, just like a well-made path becomes smoother over time. The soil begins to improve naturally because it is no longer being forced back to zero. At first, this feels unfamiliar, almost too simple, but once you see the logic, it becomes clear that you are not abandoning work. You are redirecting it into something that lasts. To understand why this works, you have to stop thinking of soil as dirt and start seeing it as a living network. Healthy soil is not just particles of sand and clay sitting together. It is a structure built by organisms. Beneath the surface are billions of microbes, strands of fungi stretching like underground threads, and worms constantly moving through the ground. These organisms are the real tillers. They create channels that allow air to enter and water to soak deep instead of running off. They bind particles together into soft, crumbly structure that holds moisture while still draining properly. When organic material like leaves, compost, or mulch is placed on top, those organisms come upward to feed, pulling nutrients down slowly and building fertility exactly where roots need it. This is the part most people never understand. The soil is designed to be fed from above, not mixed from below. When you disturb it with blades or heavy digging, you break those fungal highways, collapse the tunnels, and expose living material to sunlight and oxygen that quickly destroy it. The network has to rebuild itself from scratch every time, which is why tilled ground always struggles to hold water, resist weeds, or maintain nutrients. But when the surface is left intact and continuously covered with organic layers, that underground community expands year after year. The system becomes stronger, more stable, and more productive without needing force, because biology is now doing the work that machines were trying to imitate. Now the process becomes very practical, and this is where you begin building instead of digging. You start by marking out the shape of your bed and identifying the paths where you will walk, making sure those paths are clear and permanent, because once the bed is built, you will never step inside it again. There is no need to turn the soil or remove the grass. Instead, you lay down a thick layer of plain cardboard directly on top of whatever is growing there. Overlap the edges so no light can reach through, then soak it with water so it settles flat against the ground. This layer acts as a natural barrier, blocking weeds while slowly decomposing into food for the organisms below, all without a single shovel of digging. On top of that surface, you begin adding bulk organic matter such as straw, shredded leaves, or old hay, spreading it evenly about 8 to 10 inches deep. This becomes the long-term sponge of the system, the layer that will hold moisture and slowly break down over time. You are not packing it down, just letting it sit loosely so air can move through it. Then you add the top layer, 4 to 6 inches of finished compost, creating the surface where seeds and transplants will grow. At this point, you are building upward, not downward, forming a raised, living layer that mimics years of natural accumulation. Here's where most people must change their habits. Once this bed exists, it is never stepped on. All movement happens from the paths, protecting the structure you just created. Finally, you cover the surface with a protective mulch such as straw or chopped leaves, shielding the soil from sun and wind while locking in moisture. Instead of exposing the ground, you keep it covered at all times. The result is a layered system that settles naturally, feeds itself from below, and requires no mechanical effort to maintain. And as you stand back looking at it, you realize you did not fight land at all. You simply arranged materials so the biology could take over and do what it already knows how to do. Once this system is in place, the results begin to show faster than most people expect, and more importantly, they continue improving instead of fading. A gardener who started with just one bed as an experiment saw the difference within the first season. That single bed produced steady harvests while the rest of the tilled garden struggled with weeds and drying soil. By midsummer, watering was needed only once or twice a week because the layered base was holding moisture, cutting water use by nearly half compared to previous years. Instead of fighting new weeds after every rain, only a few appeared, and those were easily pulled because the soil remained soft and undisturbed. The following year, that same bed performed even better without being rebuilt, proving that the effort was not temporary but cumulative. From there, expansion became simple. Another bed was added beside it, then another, each one following the same pattern without requiring heavy labor. Because the structure stays intact, every new section connects into a larger system that behaves the same way. During hot months, the mulch protects the soil from drying. In heavy rain, the raised layers drain without compacting. Even in colder seasons, the covered ground stays active longer, allowing earlier planting when other gardens are still too wet to work. This system does not depend on perfect weather or constant attention. It functions consistently across conditions, which is what turns it from a gardening technique into a reliable way to produce food year after year with less input and more confidence. After a few seasons, you begin to notice that what you built is more than just a garden bed. The soil itself has become an asset, something that gains value instead of wearing out. Each year, it holds more moisture, supports more life, and produces more food without asking you to start over. You are no longer buying bags of fertility or trying to repair damage from the previous season. The nutrients stay where they belong, cycling through the system again and again. Instead of resetting the ground every spring, the work you did continues paying back, quietly improving beneath the surface whether you are standing there or not. Your property starts behaving less like a space that needs constant maintenance and more like a small production system, turning organic matter into nourishment season after season with fewer outside inputs. That shift changes how you see the land and your role in it. You move from reacting to problems to guiding a process that sustains itself. Choosing this method is choosing to build something stable rather than temporary, to rely on cycles you control instead of supplies you must purchase. And over time, that decision creates a deeper sense of independence because you are no longer just growing plants. You are managing a living system that continues working long after the initial effort is finished.